When last we left our intrepid heroes, they were on an eastbound train, heading for the secret robot factory of the diabolical Dr. Vornoff in scenic upstate New York.
I can only pray we're not too late to stop that mad fiend from unleashing his army of killer robots.
Gee, Captain Breakers, all this robot stuff gives me the creeps. You mean to tell me they're all the same in every way?
That's right, Billy. A robot may look superficially human, but it has no identity of its own. They're all mutually interchangeable.
I still say it gives me the creeps.
I don't blame you. The idea of something that is both human-ish and completely standardized is a dangerous and frightening one.
What do you mean?
Well, Billy, standardization, that is, making things all measured to fit a certain format, doesn't have to be a bad thing. The world as we know it couldn't run without standardization.
Really?
Take this train, for example. When the engineer takes the train out of the station, he trusts that all the track we'll meet along the way will be 4 feet 8.5 inches wide. That's the American standard, and the train is built to run on that exact width. Can you imagine what would happen if the people who lay the track decided that between Philadelphia and New York, the track would instead be 6 feet wide? Or 3 feet?
Gee, Captain Breakers, I guess the train would derail.
Exactly, Billy. Or they need to build a different kind of train, one that ran on the different track width. There are some places and some rail networks that use other standardized width, and build their trains accordingly.
Like how they use different electrical plugs in Europe.
Now you're getting it. Maybe someday there will be a universal standard, but for now, everything is at least standardized on each rail network, and that works okay.
Wow, I never knew how important standardization was.
That's the beauty of it. Most of the time, we don't have to know this or think about it. Standardization is a powerful thing and it can do a lot of good. Just like the rails themselves, the idea of standardization is a kind of infrastructure. But instead of moving cargo and people, it moves other ideas. And like a train track, we don't really have to think about them until they break down. Or they're turned against us.
Like with these killer robots.
Exactly. One thing I learned in the Air Force is that sometimes you have to tear up the infrastructure. We usually talk about building bridges as a good thing, but back in the day I had to bomb a few bridges to keep the bad guys from reaching innocent people. Infrastructure can be a tool of evil, especially when it tries to impose that kind of standardization onto human beings. Or other living things, like our friend Kogar here.
Ook.
You said it, Kogar.
What do you mean, Captain Breakers?
Well, the people who create these standards are just people, and they have their own flaws. They bring their own biases and their own ulterior motives. When they rolled out the standard rail width, they had to modify all the existing track to meet it, and I'm sure that wasn't a clean process.
You think maybe they had to knock down a few people's houses to make room for wider tracks?
I wouldn't be surprised. Most people would agree that it was worth knocking down a few houses, but that's easy to say when your house is still standing. There's always someone who pays the price, and it's usually the people who get the least say in the matter. Or here's another example. Tell me, Billy, are you old enough to remember a thing called eugenics?
Well, let me think. Wasn't eugenics that kooky scheme to try to perfect a race of atomic supermen or something?
You're not too far off, Billy. It was an effort to breed what they thought would be a better race of people. In effect, to standardize certain inherited traits. But it wasn't an impartial standardization. It couldn't be. So qualities like, say, a more European nose shape were seen as preferable to a more African nose. You can see where this is going.
Well, that's just plain old racist bigotry masquerading as impartial science.
Exactly, Billy. And it has no place in a country founded on the principle that all men are created equal. And don't even get me started on what a crock IQ is.
Gee whiz.
And I think that's why decent people like you find these robots so unsettling. They represent the tyrant's vision of a perfectly standardized version of humanity that tolerates no nuance or ambiguity. But we know from experience that these things aren't as impartial and perfect as they want us to think. The only person who benefits from that kind of standardization is the guy who controls the robots. Uniformity is all right for railroad tracks, but not for human beings.
Ook.
Or gorillas, thank you, Kogar.
Willikers, Captain Breakers, look! It's one of the robots, and it's bending the track!
Okay, the other reason we find these robots so unsettling is that Dr. Vornoff just chose an unnecessarily creepy design for them. Why does it look like that?
We're going to derail after all!